Happy Halloween, everyone! If you're here for the new PQ River story, it begins at that time on screen now. For everyone else, let's get started with a story about a very unique Halloween haunted house, and its very unique uninvited werewolf guest. And the person who sent us this one is calling it a Dogman broke into our Halloween haunted house. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I am a guy from Michigan who spent one summer and autumn working with my Canadian cousin at a weird haunted house type exhibit up there in Canada back in the early 80s. I don't know if you'll be able to do the map thing that I've seen you do with my story, because I never returned to Canada and that cousin passed on some years back. I do remember that my cousin lived in Sudbury and two of his associates lived in Adamsdale, if that helps at all. I was always driven to and from work at the haunted house, and all I can remember is that it was on a 2-lane highway alone by itself, situated with woods all around it on either side, and across the highway too. There was a parking lot and our fake cemetery around the rear, and it was a pretty remarkable looking old mansion. The strangest thing to me about the place was how you could see it from the road. It could have been placed back further into those woods, but it was almost as though the house were afraid to go any further back there. Another weird thing about this place was that it was sort of almost a werewolf museum, or a werewolf wax museum, kind of. This was the early 80s, and it was Canada, so I should have been surprised to find a calmer and lamer version of an American haunted house attraction up there. Whereas in America we'd have a guy dressed up as a monster or a maniac jump out and say boo. Up there, they had these nice-looking life-size statues and realistic-looking dummies, all set up and on display. And then there would be guided tours, where some Canadian would take you from werewolf to werewolf, telling you a scary story that this particular werewolf was alleged to have been involved with. Some of the guides would refer to the werewolves as replicas of the originals, but others would insist that these were the real taxidermied and stuffed bodies of actual werewolves. That always made me giggle when I would hear that, and I tried to get the job of the tour guide, but I never did. They said my accent was too foreign sounding, which I took at the time as a joke. And now I'm not so sure how they meant it, because I did have a real Detroit accent back then, if anyone is old enough and Midwestern enough to remember what that accent sounded like. It's gone away as I've grown older. But anyway, I was there to move large things and guide people who got lost, to repatriate kids that lost their parents and that sort of stuff. They had this incredible supply of real life-sized werewolves, and the entire thing was werewolf specific. They had this French term for them. They didn't say werewolves, but that was clearly what they were. They sure looked real. Well, not all of them, but most of them. In the late summer before the house opened, I got to spend a lot of time in this combination warehouse and artist shop, where this French guy and a team of snotty people would grind out these life-size werewolf dummies, made of some kind of wax or something, that they would then sew hair into. Can you imagine that? Sewing the fur into the werewolf dummies. The eyes looked shiny and real, too. These were master craftsmen, and they reminded me of that as often as they could. They were the great artists, and I was just a lowly American grunt who needed to move their great French-Canadian art carefully. I mean, they were jerky idiots, but they did make impressive werewolf displays. So I would haul these things and store them, then help the interior decorators arrange them inside the old mansion. There was also a lot of cleanup involved, and I worked very hard that summer. It was creepy being around the old werewolves, but it was also kind of weirdly exciting. I mean, if I had stayed home that summer, I wouldn't have been doing anything nearly as interesting. So this exhibit opened up in September, and I was only heading back to the States in the third week. So when it opened up, I was still working in and around the mansion doing cleanup, security, also still moving werewolves back and forth between the warehouse where they were made and the mansion we were showing them off inside of. So on one of the nights I was working security in the front by the ticket taker, as there had been some unruly teenagers trying to force their way inside earlier. While I was standing there, a number of people who were exiting complimented the ticket taker on that one animatronic werewolf. She just kind of looked at them funny. I don't know if she knew what the word animatronic meant. I know I didn't. Well, I mean, it sounded familiar, but I couldn't give you the definition. I knew I had heard the word before, but I didn't remember where. So the night wore on, and another person made a comment while leaving about the animatronic werewolf. This time I stopped the guy, and I asked him to be more specific. What was it he liked about the animatronic werewolf? The guy thought about it, and he said it was the way it would stand there perfectly still, and then when you least expected it, the thing would lunge out at you and try to grab you. The customer said that the whole house should have been like that one room. Then he asked me how we did it. He said he couldn't see hydraulic cables anywhere, but it was clearly a hydraulically operated animatronic werewolf. That was when I knew where I'd heard the word before. My younger brother. He read Fangoria magazine. Animatronic monsters were monsters in the movies. They were made by pushing buttons that moved air inside them and made bladders open up and shut or whatever. I don't know. My brother reminded me. Well, we didn't have anything like that inside this house. We had statues. If any of those things had moved, it would have shocked me half to death. But none of them did, because we did not have any moving displays. When the customer left, the ticket taker turned to me and restated the obvious. We didn't have any moving werewolf displays, so who or what was in the house, lunging out to grab our paying customers? With the way she was looking at me, I figured out that she meant I should go and find the answer to that question for myself. Suddenly my summer didn't seem as much fun as it had up to that point. When I walked back into that house, the scary Halloween music suddenly didn't seem so quaint and kitsch anymore. It felt like I was walking into the heart of a living Halloween horror movie. And I have to say that the entire experience was more than a little overwhelming. It felt like I was above myself, looking down and watching, telling myself not to go back in there. But I wasn't listening. I kept going back deeper and deeper into the belly of the beast. They had this music playing. It sounded like Danny Elfman music, but I'm not sure that existed yet in those days. It could have been a drunken lunatic playing a calliope over and over. The same thing each time, but with only slight changes. The music was making me feel dizzy, and my own fear was making me sweat inside the house, which was not really that warm. I looked around in every room, squeezing between couples and families, swimming upstream in essence, trying to listen in on their conversations to find out if any of them were talking about what I was looking for. Whatever that was. If it was a guy in a costume, then he could be anywhere. If it really was some kind of malfunctioning machine-operated werewolf dummy, then I would only really be able to notice it if I happened to be looking at it when it moved. Then I heard a few people screaming in the next room, and I realized there might be a second way to locate what I needed to find. People were now running out of that room toward me, with looks on their face of the real kind of fright, not the fun kind. I waited for my chance. Then I sprang into that room, where all the wolf statues were standing up, perfectly still. I asked some of the people outside the door what they were screaming about, and they told me the werewolf moved. I asked them which one, but nobody wanted to go back in there. I turned the house lights on in that room, and we could all see 3 perfectly still, upright standing werewolf-type figures. They all looked like dummies to me, even in the light. I didn't see one that looked more real than the others. Slowly, some of the people began walking with me back into the room. We all walked up to this werewolf in one corner. To me, it didn't really look any different from the other 2. But this was the one everyone was now slowly creeping up to. I watched its chest for signs of breathing, but I saw none. I looked around its eyes and its mouth, but I saw no signs of life in that creature. I was about to say just that, to the small crowd gathered around me. But then that thing lunged at all of us. Pandemonium broke loose. We all ran out of that room screaming incoherently. It was my job to calm situations like this down, but I was screaming louder than anyone else. Some people got bruised, but there were no major injuries. We had to shut the place down and call both the police and some animal control types, who spent hours searching the place, but didn't find any animals larger than mice inside there. They basically blamed it on me since I was leaving for the States soon anyway, and then everyone went back to work. I was sore at them for blaming me, and I got into an argument with my cousin about it. I don't really know if the werewolf came back to bother them again after that or not, but I sure hope it did. I hope it cost them lots of business, because it wasn't fair that I should get blamed for this monster thing getting into their haunted house attraction. Some people think it was a guy in a costume, but I know it wasn't. I think it was a genuine French-Canadian werewolf. I honestly do. Real Wolfmen, True Encounters in Modern America. A lot of the stories we run on this channel are supposed to be true, but it's not like I have budget or time to look into any of the claims made. Someone who made her living looking into Dogman claims, though, was the late great Linda Godfrey. If you like the stories on this show, then you should check out this incredible audiobook from Linda called Real Wolfmen, True Encounters in Modern America. Linda goes back to the 1930s and tells a number of the better researched Dogman and werewolf stories of the 20th and 21st centuries. It's a great overview of the subject matter, whether you're new to it or even if you think you know all the stories. It's available in audiobook, audio CD, paperback, or Kindle forms at the address in the description for this video. The audiobook is over 8 hours and it's probably the best deal there. Plus, if you use the link in the description, supposedly you're helping us out here in some way that I'm still learning about. And now get ready, because here comes our first narrator from 2016, PQ River, with an all-new story. Take it away, PQ.
I angered a werewolf, or I got a werewolf mad. Read by PQ River. Dear Scary Stories NYC. This happened many years ago, but I remember it like it's still happening now. I used to be a real smart mouth when I was younger, but sadly, my brain was never as smart as my mouth. I used to pick fights with bigger guys as a matter of course, and although I got my behind handed to me repeatedly, I survived each encounter. If it doesn't kill me, then it makes me stronger. That's a saying I made up. It's one of the wiser things I've ever said. Of course, I tend not to say too many wise things. I don't want to intimidate the folks around me with my intellect, because I crave the company of down-to-earth folks. Those are God's favorite people. The salt of the earth types, you know. They shall inherit the earth, at least if they can cover the taxes on it. So, all wise guys have a big boss battle on their bucket list. Some of them don't realize it's there, but they will when they find themselves fighting a big boss. If they're really a major wise guy like me, then they'll even be the instigator of their boss battle. Like, I could have kept driving that night. I didn't have to fight with that creature. I could have gotten myself killed, or I should say my anger could have gotten me killed, I mean. What happened was this. I was driving on a highway in some nowhere town in Wisconsin. I'm originally from New Jersey, but my family disowned me and I'd moved to Michigan. I hated it there. So I was driving further west, looking for a place to settle down and try to start my life over. I was in a terrible mood, as I had really lost patience with the human race and saw no hope for myself being forced to live on the same planet as humans. When the werewolf, or Dogman, walked out onto the road in front of me, I cursed and screamed and swerved around the monster, narrowly missing him, almost skidding off the road, then somehow recovering control of the car in some fancy driving maneuvers that I probably couldn't do a second time if I tried. I was back on the road in my lane, driving at the speed limit, and the dogman that almost killed me was in my rear view mirror. Literally. So what made me slam on the brakes? Anyone else would have kept going, saying a prayer of thanks. Not me. Who gets out of the car when a feral 8-foot-tall bear dog is walking around? Guy with anger issues, that's who. I walked over, no, I stormed over to that dogman who was about to walk back into the woods. He stopped what he was doing and turned to give me a look like he thought I was out of my mind. So, okay, he was perceptive. I'll give him that. But he almost got me killed, and he deserved to be lectured. So that is what I did. I informed him that he had no right-of-way on a 2-lane highway with no vehicle. I informed him that he lacked intelligence. I informed him that I was going to punch him on the noggin, and for some reason, he chose to take offense to something I said. I weigh about 195 pounds. Ever since I turned 30, that's been my weight, and I maintain it. Well, that creature backhanded me, and all 195 pounds of me flew a good 10 feet in the air before coming in for an ugly landing on the 2-lane blacktop. I saw yellow and red things on the ground and realized those were my bloody teeth. Okay, so the dogman won the first round. So what? The first round of the fight is for wimps anyway. I was just letting that werewolf tire himself out. Then I was going to come back strong. Well, we fought for a while longer, but it continued to be more than a little one-sided. More like he took me and threw me into this tree, then he picked me up and hurled me into that one. Each time I laughed at him, and I asked that monster, "Is that the best you can do?" Well, eventually, I tried to lift my head and laugh at the dogman, but nothing happened. I'd run out of gas, and I just lay there on the ground. Lucky, beast still breathing. I woke up when some guy beeped at me to get off the road. I was lying face down in the northbound lane, and I'm lucky he didn't run me over before he saw me. I got up and slept it off in the car, then drove myself into town to look for an emergency room. They asked me if I'd gotten into a fight with the Hulk, and I just said, yeah. One doctor told me I looked like I'd been dragged down the highway on my face, and I told him he was a psychic detective. I never really fully explained what happened while I was inside that hospital. I didn't want them to think I was injured inside my brain, too. I never saw any Wolfman creatures ever again, but I did once see something from a distance that I'm pretty sure was Bigfoot. He didn't have a fight with me, though, so that story isn't as much fun to tell. But that's really all I can remember about that time I angered a werewolf, or I got a werewolf mad. This episode is executive produced by me, PQ Ribber. Catch the Overnightscape Central. You can even be part of it. It's every week at onsug.com. Scroll around, it's there, and we have a different topic every week with podcast hosts and just regular people participating in the merriment, and I personally invite you to onsug.com.
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LSCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.